So throughout the evening, I'm standing up here because I want you to see my face just a little bit, but throughout the evening, because I will be clicking through some of the slides, there might be times for some of you who are in the front that I am talking from behind your heads, but I will try my best to walk around so that we have face-to-face contact or like eye-to-eye contact and can really have conversation throughout the evening as I'm speaking to you. As Christina announced, my name is Dee Nichols. I am a lot of things that I'll go through, but before we get into it, I want to express some of my goals during the time that I have with you, and hopefully leave you with some things that can become your goals as you depart tonight. So we'll do a little bit of intro, go through some brand overview, talk a little bit about the process and ways of really honing in personal branding. Before we hop into who I am, though, I do have a question for you. How many of you have your own personal brand or branding system? Okay, a few hands. How many of you identify as entrepreneurs? Everyone, almost everyone. And for those of you who are entrepreneurs, how many of you have thought about the branding of your business, your service, your offering? So a little bit about who I am. I will spare you on all the details because there's way too much. But as I said, I am a designer. And by designer, I mean that in a lot of different ways. Designing different experiences that bring different parts of our community together to experience something new together, but also designing in the sense of communications design, graphic design, environmental elements, literally transforming public transportation buses into mobile farmers markets and designing the interior of those experiences. And now with the top image, moving on to a lot of spatial and landscape design as it relates to the Shoto Greenway that's developing in our city. But in addition to that, I do a lot of brand work. And there are a lot of teams that have such great purposes that they just want to share it all, but they don't know how. And so they bring in myself and my team to help in that process. In addition to being a designer, I'm also a speaker and an activist. I travel probably way too much to the point where I have lost my social life here, and I'm like trying to find all the fun stuff right now. I talk a lot about activism and using creative practices like art, culinary arts, design as a way of helping people be better humans to each other, especially in the face of so many social issues. And then I'm just all this other stuff. I'm a YouTuber, and I'm obsessed with sticky notes and just a weird human who loves being weird and fun and quirky, and I'm never at a loss for ideas. That's me in a nutshell, and because of all of these experiences, I've had to create a brand for myself in a comprehensive package so that people know who I am, what I can offer, and how we can create magic and value in the worlds that surround them. Branding has been something super powerful, and it, of course, manifests in so many ways, but it also opens up a lot of different activities and opportunities for collaboration and sometimes cool quirks like having dolls made after you, and sometimes being asked to be on TV shows. The spoiler is that I very likely may say no to this TV show because I might be going to Harvard in the fall. So gotta prioritize education. But that's enough about me. That's like the quickest I've ever done that. And I really want to focus on this element of what is a brand. And I would love to hear from you. What is your definition of such? How do you define brand and branding?
Kind of the face of the business.
Face of the business,
Also the heart, the soul,
the heart and the soul,
Kind of like your service offerings also for your business.
Yeah.
It should be inclusive of your brand.
Indeed. and the value that comes from those offerings. Any other thoughts, guesses, definitions?
What gives it cohesion?
Cohesion, that's a good one. Yeah, there are a lot of different definitions that we'll very quickly go through. It's the collective image of the company as values the products and services it provides. A lot of you hinted at that element. I really love conferences, and I think conferences are spaces and experiences that are so awesomely branded when you go to a good one, that is, because when you enter that city and you enter that space, you know that everything around it is all in sync, is super cohesive, as you were saying, and there's a lot to engage in terms of the value, and that aesthetic really does affect the experience that people have. Branding is also a process. I don't think I heard anyone say that element, but it's a process of creating these things. And not just the creation of the visuals, but also the creation of the impressions, what other people see and learn and feel about who you are, what you're doing, what you have to offer. Now, as a designer, our branding process is super intense. There's way too much that goes into it when working with organizations, companies, etc. But with thinking about the branding process for ourselves, I always like to make it concise into these 3 areas. As you may have already overheard, I like to use D words a lot. I don't know, I'm inspired by Oprah. She used a lot of O's. But for me, that process is simple as defining who you are. Being able to do that deep reflection on what your values are, what your offerings are. What are the skills that you're really good at? What are the things that you know that perhaps others might want to learn? And once you have some sense of that, start to design it. How does that manifest itself into really thinking about who those target audiences are, what those visuals are, what that logo is that reflects who you are, but also what are those messages, keywords? What is the voice of your brand? Is it funny? Is it super serious and insightful? A lot of my stuff is super motivational and happy and joyful because I'm an optimist, and I feel like in the midst of everything that's going on, there has to be more of us who are able to help project forward some type of inkling of positivity. So once you go through that process of designing this identity for yourself and for your brand, and honestly, this is the longest process, then you start to deepen that. And a lot of that takes community engagement. That takes getting to know who's using your services, getting to know ways that you can improve what you offer to them, creating content that, even if it's not generating direct dollars, can actually sustain the support that you have from your audiences and your consumers. But also really thinking about those other ways that you keep it fun, that you stay authentic and consistent with what you've developed. So branding is a process. And once you start creating that process, then you get to that impression and what people think about it. There are a vast array of possible audiences for whatever it is that you're offering to the world. Of course, those direct consumers, but also thinking about the general public, the media, different experts in whatever field you're in, how suppliers, prospective partners, all of those who have to interface with your brand, even if they are not directly buying something or receiving something from you, they all have an opinion. They all have a perspective. And having a brand that can communicate with all of those sources is just as valuable. So branding is a system. Branding is the system that allows you to do that, that allows you to express how unique you are and differentiate yourself from everyone else that's probably doing some similar stuff as you're doing. We'll keep it going. So why does this matter? I'll spare you with the questioning amongst you and just list a few reasons. We all crave connection. Even though there are people in the world that think that personal brands are shallow and pompous and, I don't know, narcissistic. They are a way to establish authentic connections with people. They challenge you to be more authentic and consistent in the ways that you show up in the world and in different spaces. It's a way of creating a community around not only the things that you believe in, but the things that you're passionate about. I know sometimes it sucks to feel like I'm the only one who likes this thing, that I'm the only one who's super fascinated with sticky notes. And I just keep meeting people who are super nerdy about sticky notes, and that has become such a deep community for me. But it's also an opportunity for you to define your style, put a message into the world, tell your story, and sometimes sell some things, make some money, and build loyalty and trust from others in that process. And I always like to tell people that in the midst of wrestling with, that balance of who we are as individuals and who we are as a brand, as we present ourselves externally in the world, that branding, those perceptions are going to exist no matter what. And so if we can be more strategic about it, we can stay ahead of the game. All right. Some quick overview. Let's talk about a little bit of process. So I showed you a diagram that had 3 parts, but we're going to break those down into 7. Going from the self-discovery assessment to the design elements, and then to that deepening, but being a little bit more specific about it. So with the self-discovery elements, it's important to really start to define your values, your personal mission, all of those good things. One of the things that helped me a long, long time ago when I was still just a wee college student at age 19, trying to learn how to use Illustrator and design websites through MySpace and stuff, and Tumblr in this very specific case. I was studying in this course called Voice about manifestos. And I realized that as much as companies like the Holsti manifesto, that's on the right, there are a lot of individual designers who had manifestos about who they were in the world and what their positioning was. And I wanted to create that for the people who I called creative catalysts. And that manifesto was a Tumblr for years, but that actually became the foundations of my first business, which was called Catalyst by Design, which then pivoted into Civic Creatives. And even though this manifesto now is just a part of our company story, like it's changed forms, it is still the core of what we do, what our values are, and who we are as we engage with our partners, our clients, communities that we're interfacing with. So one challenge that I would have for you is to create some type of manifesto. It can be on a sticky note. It can be something that you just pin to your wall that says, here is the person that I am, here's what I believe in, and here's how I'm gonna make a difference in other people's lives. As you start to do a lot of the personal awareness work, there's some other tools that might be helpful. One that helps you understand your persona into the branding system, but also the personas of your target audiences. Have any of you ever seen this chart? No? So a few people. I really like it in the sense of like helping to simplify like our personalities and how that might develop into some type of visual or content-based voice. And it goes through this chart of different types of actions at its core. So leaving your mark, connecting, providing some type of structure or insight or direction. And there's actually an online tool that you can use to help you map out where you are on this particular chart. But a lot of people are able to do it just by reading the colored rings that are a part of it and the outer titles that are a part of it. For me, as an artist, it was super easy. Like, I'm that top blue. I'm also someone who's always trying to share like how-tos, so the sage. And then always traveling, showing and vlogging what I'm doing, where I'm doing it, and who I'm doing it with, that explorer. And so I would challenge you, as you have this in your possession, to start to think about, well, where does your brand, where does your personality, where does your product or your service, that offering, where does it align itself on this type of chart? Is it just in one space? Is it just that upper right quadrant? Or is it doing a little bit of everything? And once you start to build those connections, you can really start to establish, well, if I know that I'm someone who's good at telling the hero story and helping people find mastery at something, then I can pair that with, say, the artist and talk about innovation in these very heroic ways. This can be a very helpful tool for some of that self-analysis process. How many of you have seen this tool, the persona map? Have any of you ever heard of the business model canvas? Okay, a few heads. So with the business model canvas, there have been extended volumes of that initial book and that initial set of tools that go into specific quadrants of that initial canvas. And when it comes to your target audience, this is often the one that they utilize in order to help people better understand who might be their users, who might be their customers. The simple process is to draw a head in the middle, maybe give the person a name, some demographics, and at the top of it, really start to ask yourself, if this person is to be one of my community members, one of my audience members, one of my customers, what might they be thinking and feeling? What might matter to them? What might be some of the things that they see around them? What are some of the things that they're hearing? What are those messages that they're receiving about themselves or about the world at large? What are things that they might say and do? How might they express themselves? What might be their attitudes? And then at the very bottom, what are those challenges that they're facing? What are those pains? And how can I help them, remediate those pains? But also, what are their hopes? By doing this activity, it can help you better target some of the content that may come out of your brand so that you're connecting in authentic ways, hitting touch points that are of importance with the people who are part of your community. So with a lot of that self-discovery comes a lot of self-critique, just a little bit too. One thing that I like to encourage people to do is to audit their current existence, at least in the digital realm. Have any of you ever done that? Ever Googled yourself? Were you pleased by the things that you saw? For the most part? Nothing too embarrassing came up? See, years ago, when I was still just a college student, I would Google myself because my career advisor would tell me to do that in preparation for job interviews and stuff. And I had no idea how to control the images that popped up because back then, my only social media platform was Facebook, and Facebook was for college students. And as a college student, all my photos were of me partying and hanging out with frats and being super just, off-brand. I was the sweatshirt person in college, just unkempt. And I had to learn how to clean that up. I had to learn about SEO, search engine optimization, how to make those hits come with my name so that when you Google D. Nichols, you get my website, you get my TED Talks, you get important press that I've done, and you're able to have a more curated experience of who I am as a person. That also meant deleting a lot of my favorite moments from college. And just keeping that on an external hard drive somewhere. So I encourage you to do an audit of your name. And there are some methods that we'll get into later that might be might be helpful as a start to increase your optimization with certain search engines. Another tool that you can use is namecheck.com. This is really helpful when you are developing a URL, if you're creating a moniker. So say you don't want to use your name, your personal name, you can look up whatever that name is that you do want to use and see if there are any types of URLs available, or like domain names available for it. You can see if it's utilized by any social media sites, and it's super extensive. It's so helpful. That's the first step for when you're starting a branding process, but also for who you currently are, because there might be some other, what's your name? Danielle. There might be some other Danielles. What's your like Twitter name or Instagram? There's not another person. There might be another D. Nichols somewhere in the world. That's a very unique one. Other things to audit when it comes to your brand, it's not just the outward-facing stuff, but also those analytics that start to tell you about how people are utilizing the things that you're creating. Almost every social media website has its own built-in analytics, especially if you've turned your product, your business into the business pages, say on Facebook or Instagram and sometimes with Twitter as well. And those analytics tell you the things like, of course, impressions. How many people are actually getting in contact with the content that you're posting or creating. But also on a lot of these sites, it's telling you how they're navigating through your website. It's telling you, with Instagram in particular, how many people are swiping right when they see your stories. How many people are exiting out of the app altogether because they saw your story. That's not your fault if that's happening. A lot of people just swipe a lot more now. But it also helps to inform where you might need to prioritize certain info and certain content. And so that type of auditing can be super helpful as well. One thing that I nerd out about as like a consultant for a lot of these types of things is the visual consistency and the consistency of voice. When you go through certain sites, are you using the same colors? Are you using the same typefaces? Is your brand something that when people see it, they know it? Is it unique? And are you frequent and consistent with the things that you post? So take a self-assessment. Don't be like hypercritical, because that can be a very bad place too. But before you start getting deep into the brand design, see where you already are, because that can help inform where you might need to go. And once you do that, it's time for my favorite part, which is the brand identity development. And this is different than your brand, which is the whole system. The brand identity are those visuals. This is a really great visual metaphor for it, that your logo, your colors, your fonts, all of those are just the peak of this huge, huge iceberg. And when it comes to logos and visuals in particular, it's always good to be reminded that our eyes, our minds, our just everyday existence is like inundated with so much. We see brands more often than we can count. If you go to a grocery store, you are just like overwhelmed with brand after brand after brand. Sometimes it's hard to make decisions about what to do, what to buy, unless you have that type of loyalty. And so you want to be able to create some parts of your brand identity that can stand out in the midst of all of that visual clutter that you, I, and everyone else are experiencing on a day-to-day basis. This is a list of some of those. And I won't go through all of them because they're pretty common to know. Yeah, we're gonna keep going. I think these are somewhat self-explanatory. The only thing that I will explain is the difference between your logo and those other icons and symbols. Your logo is the main thing, but there might be icons that are a part of your communication system that helps people know different parts of who you are and what you're doing. And those are their own category of things outside of your logo. Color theory is one of my favorite things ever because we really don't fully recognize just how much the psychology of color influences so much of our choices and our moods. The fact that when you see red, you want to shop just a little bit more. You might get excited about some things. And our associations when we see certain environmental logos, as an example, we know that green is very likely somewhere in there. So this chart and this one are great tools for you to use just to think about, well, what might my favorite colors or the things that, or the hues that I'm integrating into my branding system and my content strategies, what might these be communicating to people? Are they in alignment with what I want to communicate? How many of you have like a logo that uses fonts and typefaces? How would you describe yours?
Clean lines.
Clean lines. Sans serif?
It's called Avenir, so.
Sans serif, yeah. What about yours?
I picked something that looked like it was hand-drawn.
Okay. Little calligraphy in there. Uh-huh. What do you think that expresses to people?
That I'm a creative person, like, and I put my little own stamp, or so it's like a signature.
Authenticity.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who else? Does anyone have a serif? Oh, you're like, nope, no serifs. You have a serif?
Both, actually.
Mm-hmm. Sans serif? Uh-huh.
So, like my business, like the title of my business, Forest and Meadow, is serif. Sans serif, apothecary, and herbal clinic is sans, smaller.
Were you intentional about that balance? Mm-hmm. What went into your theory, your logic behind that?
Part of it, it's really small type for the sans serif part, so I didn't want to look too like busy or cluttered. And there's a certain like modernity to my logo, but also I wanted it to feel like familiar, and I feel like serif fonts feel very familiar to a lot of us.
I appreciate those thoughts. You're hitting it. That oftentimes when people want to communicate some type of high quality, they may use a slab serif, but maybe not a regular serif, because regular serifs, like the typefaces that you see in the top left corner, they often give you that sense of tradition, sometimes the intellectualism, and sometimes people want something different, maybe something chic, something stylish, and so they go for typefaces that are more modern. Some people want to be funny, and they use just wacky, wonky typefaces, and it works. I think part of it is finding what fonts, what typefaces, what families, in terms of the boldness, in terms of the style of the lettering. How do all of those communicate and contribute to what your brand wants to express? When it comes to touch points, these are also some very common things. One thing that I always like to bring out, though, is the power of personal style as part of your branding process. I think a lot of people don't realize that is such a powerful influence when you can walk into a space or like someone can see you across a crowd and they're like, hey, that's that person. Case in point, how many of you have seen the images of the man in the blue vest, like the activist in the blue vest? None of you. What? What? That was like my best example. So DeRay McKesson, he was an educator in a past life. He once ran for office in Baltimore, but in 2014, he was a protester here in St. Louis when the uprising happened in Ferguson. And he doesn't live here, but he is like super famous now because every single day that he went out to protest, he wore this one bright blue bubble vest. And when like photojournalists caught images, they always saw that blue vest, and he was always somewhere in the images. There have been photos of him where he's staged his arrest, and people have seen it in the blue vest. There has been a lawsuit because there was a movie company that made a character, I forget which movie, but it was like a movie about monkeys. They made a character that was similar to him, like this little monkey that was wearing a blue vest. And now he's in these like red carpet events with other celebrities, because he's a celebrity, with other celebrities because of his blue vest. And he still wears his blue vest whether or not he is in a tuxedo or he's wearing Nikes, jeans, and a t-shirt. And that type of style as a way of branding yourself, as a way of positioning yourself, is something like more powerful than I've ever seen. There's some really other great examples of like certain fashion designers who wear Super Bowl glasses. There are some people on the internet who have these very rainbow types of styles with the things that they post. And when they make public appearances, they go out in like tutus and rainbow style things. I'm one of those people. You mostly will see me in all black, a blazer, and some really cool boots. Like those are the things that like people might know me for if they saw me. But that is just as valuable as, say, your business card. That is one of your main ways that you can be intentional about the mark that you're making with your personal brand. And this is just an extended look at some of those things, some of those other touch points. The only thing that I will bring out with this one, though, is the power of word of mouth. That part of your brand is also what people are expressing about you and how they talk about you. Sometimes that's out of our control, but oftentimes when I see people and they're like, hey, I've heard so much about you, and I'm always like, I hope it was good stuff, because I want the people around me who are part of my community, who are part of my audience, to know and feel that I care deeply about the world, that I show up when I can, that I am I am committed to a lot of things. And if I ever hear like, oh, someone said that you were super duper rude and you cursed at people, like I know that that's not a truth, because that's not how I show up in the world. So being able to gauge part of how people perceive you through the things that they say about you. One of the ways to bring all of these things together, the logos, the typefaces, the messages and the wording, the key words that are used, or vocabulary that's used to define your brand, is creating a style guide. How many of you have ever created one of these? A few people, okay. I love how you two looked at each other like, hey, we've done this. This is a very useful tool that you can use to stay organized and consistent, and it can manifest in so many ways. I was always trained to make like a little booklet that I can always have on me. Everyone can't do that. Sometimes people use Excel and they write out everything that is a part of their branding process, and they use different sheets to define what their typefaces are, what their fonts are, what their colors are, all of those things. There are some people who use certain resources like these, to keep all of those assets. These are some of my favorites. There are tons out there that you can use. Right now, a lot of my stuff is in Asana. A lot of people also use Trello, because you can create these cards that are categories and then just start to plop in things in order to define what the different parts of what you're doing. And not only is that useful, but Asana also has this project management edge to it, where you can give yourself tasks to keep up with the type of content that you want to create. And you can then start to use tags to plug in a lot of those assets. How many of you have heard or used Canva? This is like everyone's favorite nowadays because it's just so useful, whether you're making a mood board or you're making a full branding style guide for everything that you do. Canva is like the way to go. And then Frontify is more of an expanded version of Canva, but it's expensive. We're almost through it. Number 4, about voice and authority. So part of that consistency comes through the content that you create. And you want to have a goal, like you want to have a purpose with creating content on the internet that's related to your personal brand and or your business brand. Some of those goals might be to earn money, and that's a-okay. It is a like gold mine to be on the internet and creating content, creating products, sharing knowledge. All of those things are healthy goals. Some of it can also be about just awareness of who you are and what you have to offer. And so what are the ways that you can use storytelling to help bring people into your world and into who you are as a person and thus as a brand. But also it's a good way to gain a lot of insight for those goals that you've set for yourself in your journey. That by having those authentic conversations and building those relationships with others in the world who are perhaps like-minded or maybe even challenge some of your views, there's a lot of growth and direction that can come from that. When it comes to your content, I think it should always have some sense of usefulness to others. Like, of course, we all have spaces where we just want to rant about whatever the bad service was at the restaurant that we just left. There is space on the internet for that type of stuff where it's just about me. But for a lot of other things, there are actually so much that we can offer and communicate that others can relate to. And so why not, you know? In terms of ease of reading, so many of us read so much less these days, including myself. I watch a lot of videos. I don't read that much. And so when I do read, I want it to be like super, super quick. Or if it's long, I want it to be really, really good, you know? But also recognizing that there might be some people who have different levels of literacy. And so if you can make your content more accessible to different types of readers, different types of engagers, that can also be great. And it can be even paired with other avenues like podcasts, so audio or video, or just image-based stuff like Instagram. And then continuing with some of those other possible uses of your content. So I could do a whole session about all of the platforms. This is just a handful. But the only thing that I'll say about this is that you don't have to be on everything. Just to like affirm that like if you're not that great with LinkedIn, you don't have to force yourself to be there unless your audience is really, really there. Like if you're doing something that's about professional development or something, like LinkedIn might be your number one place to go. But for a lot of people, they're like, that's where I keep my virtual or like my digital resume. I don't use it. And there are people like me who's like, but there's so much happening on LinkedIn. And so find your sweet spot. With a lot of these, there are ways to earn passive revenue just by posting content. And as you can see, I've listed YouTube, and I should have listed Twitch too, in both of these columns, both platforms and marketplaces, because YouTube, which is owned by the largest search engine, is the second largest search engine in the world. And it is one of the few social media platforms where you can earn revenue simply through the ads or simply through like the people who are watching your stuff. And so I'm a big fan of YouTube, but that's not for everyone. Like that process takes a long time. There are certain thresholds that you have to pass before you can earn money. And so a lot of people find more ease with setting up an online store, connecting that store to Facebook, having that Facebook go to Instagram, making Instagram posts and making a buck way quicker. So finding that thing that works for you is also part of that branding process. And then find those other opportunities to position your brand. This is like my favorite stuff. Like a lot of the opportunities that I get in life now are not necessarily like me applying for things. It's somebody who's found me online and said, hey, I really like what you have to offer to the world. Can I work with you? Or someone who's seen me at an event giving a talk and they're like, hey, can you come and say the same stuff to my community, to my students, to my conference? So there are ways to get yourself out there outside of the traditional networking events in order to promote your brand, deepen your brand or your relationships and community, and gain new opportunities for growth. Some of those include collaboration. There are not enough people who are early entrepreneurs collaborating with others. I think one of the biggest things that we can do for ourselves is transition from a scarcity mentality to an abundance mentality and realize that if I collaborate with you, even though you might seem like a competitor, we can both win. Like we can both grow and gain and learn from that process. So finding those collaborations through guest posting, media interviews, being on other people's platforms, working on a project in particular or an event with another entity, all of those become a way of positioning your brand into the world. And then another thing is part of that struggle that a lot of us have with personal brands, which is, well, I don't want to seem too narcissistic and do like some people do and have their own hashtag for their name. But I actually think that is beneficial because one, it's a great way to organize your content or like organize a set of content on the internet by not only having people tag you in, say, the photos or the posts that they make about what you're doing or who your brand is, but you're able to see everything that has been associated with it, even if you haven't directly engaged with them. And so I do encourage people to make a hashtag either out of your personal name, add it to as many posts as possible to populate that hashtag, and then start from there to build even more connections and have conversations with those folks who are using that hashtag. That can be for your product, for your business. Sometimes it's really great to do that for even smaller initiatives and events as well. When it comes to hashtag clouds, some people get super obsessed with this part. Have you ever been scrolling on, say, Instagram, and you see a post and the description of the post, or like the actual blurb, is like a one-liner. And then there are like these dots, and then the rest of it, like the rest of the characters, is nothing but hashtags. There is benefit to that, even though it's annoying. And part of that benefit is making sure that your posts are also being connected to other subject areas so that others can see what you're posting. If you're anything like me when it comes to a platform like Instagram in particular, I get sucked into the wormhole super easily. I wake up most mornings at 5 and I'm not out of bed until about 7 because I'm still on Instagram just scrolling through people's posts and videos. And one way that you can do that is start to create a set of hashtags or just a set of vocabulary words that are related to your brand, your product, your name, and what you do. If you are, in this case, women entrepreneurs, there could be hashtag women entrepreneurs, hashtag woman entrepreneur, hashtag lady bosses, hashtag all of these things that are synonymous with that. And you can keep that, of course, in like the notes of your phone, but there are also plugins and services that you can integrate directly into some of these platforms. In particular, if you have an Android, there are plugins that go directly into Instagram, as an example. The warning that I would give is that there are some folks who take this way out of control and they start tagging Beyonce. And it's like, the hashtag Beyonce probably has 1 million people posting to that, and your post might just get lost in the crossfire. So it's healthy and effective to find those that have a mid-size frequency or, I don't know, amount of content, because then you have enough people who are using it that they might go into that hashtag and find your post, see it, follow you, and stay engaged with your work, but it's not getting that lost. And you don't want to have a hashtag, unless it's your unique hashtag, that is, say, less than 100 posts or 100 hits, because that means no one's really using that one. But if you're just starting off with your own unique hashtag, you may be under 100 for a few posts. So building community takes a lot of forms as well when it comes to engagement. How many of you have your own Facebook page? A few, okay, a few. Within your Facebook page, how many of you have Facebook groups? Okay. Not as many people. I'm really big on YouTube, or not on YouTube, I'm not that big, but I'm a big nerd about YouTube. And was like, I'm surely not the only YouTuber here in St. Louis. So I created a meetup group called STL YouTubers and Video Creators last year, and we just started meeting up and talking about YouTube strategies. And I created that Facebook group, and that is one of the groups that watches my content now. You know, like, and vice versa. Like, I watch their videos. I'm really big into food and potlucks and sharing meals. And so I started Food Spark a few years ago because all of my friends hated St. Louis, and I was like, hey, St. Louis has good food. What if we start with food and conversation? Maybe you'll start to like the city. And now Food Spark has grown into a significant part of what people know me for, even though it's not like an incorporated thing. In addition to finding those social media communities, and you can do, you know, a meetup group or a meetup page, you can also do certain websites that allow you to build communities within other types of content production. Like YouTube will allow you to have subscribers who are also paid members of your channel, if that makes sense. But in addition to those things, having live events really help with growing your audience. As I've mentioned a few times, I travel a lot. One thing that I love to do if I'm going back to a city that I've already been in is host a meetup with other folks in that city. Even if they're just like friends from college who now live there, or if they're people who have seen me speak and they're just like fans now. We go out to dinner, sometimes we take a really good group photo, and that becomes like a way of staying connected and in touch with people even across those geographies. On a local scale, you can start to do that with some of the folks who are part of your own like brand community. Host a private dinner. Invite some folks out. If you know that there are some customers that you've had who've been super loyal, celebrate them. If you know they have a birthday or something coming up, because some of these sites will tell you your customers' birthdays. Like, those types of things actually not only contribute to, I don't know, that sense of quality that your brand and you as a human provide to others around you, but it is a way of deepening those connections if you have some type of sales model in place. And then finally, actual membership sites. How many of you use Patreon? Good, me neither. But I know a little bit about Patreon in the sense that it is similar to a lot of the other sites where you can create, you know, content in any format that you desire. But instead of just posting that rant on Facebook for free, or posting that thing that you made on Instagram, you can post it to this private community on Patreon that pays a monthly fee to engage with you. A lot of YouTubers do this, a lot of podcasters do this, a lot of creators and songwriters also use platforms like Patreon. With essay writers, bloggers, a lot of them also use Medium, because now Medium has the ability for you to write content that is only for paid members, and based upon how many like hearts you get, you can start to earn revenue through that outlet. And then the next to last thing is really about engagement. on your end. And I'll admit to you, I really suck at this element. Consistency is not my thing. I will find all the reasons to commit and stay consistent with the projects that I'm working on for others. But when it comes to my personal brand, there might be weeks that go by before I update my website. I haven't created a YouTube video in actually I haven't created a single one this year. And there are moments where it can feel like I'm out of touch with my online friends, like my people, because I'm not producing. I'm not sustaining. I'm not being that good contributor to our relationship. And so this last section is really about us collectively being better and being consistent with what we do and who we are and how we show up. Some tools. There are a lot of content calendars that are out there. There are simple ones like Later that's mainly Instagram focused. There's TweetDeck that's mainly Twitter focused. There are also a few that are for all of the social media platforms, and you can post one post on there and send that sucker out to everything else. And I think the challenge, like the benefit is that you get that sense of increased efficiency. The challenge is that you really gotta time that stuff very well. Another easy point for staying consistent, at least in communication with updates, with offerings, with new tools that you want to share, is by having your own email list. How many of you use a service like MailChimp? Like you have a list for your people. How often are you communicating? See, that's me. That's my face too. Like, ooh, not enough.
Barely enough as I should.
Mm-hmm. I used to be a good once a weeker, and life caught up, and I had deadlines, and I was traveling, and I would just push it off. The ideas, like the content of that newsletter, wouldn't necessarily fade from my heart. It's just that I never carved time for it. So one of the things that I've been doing most recently, at least with newsletters, not necessarily with video content creation, is setting aside hours in my day, really doing a thorough assessment of where my energy is in the day, and prioritizing these types of things that are connected to my personal brand, so that there's at least a few touch points going out, some really significant points, posts that are going out almost every day. And it doesn't have to be the same lengthy essay, or it doesn't have to be the same like sales funnel. It can literally be you making a post that maybe gets someone interested in clicking that link in bio. You know, that can simply be it. But carving out a specific time of day that you know your energy is ready for your content and for your brand work could be super effective. For me, 7 a.m. every morning. One of the other things, and sometimes depending on like introversion, extroversion, going live has actually proven to be a helpful strategy for a lot of folks who have their own personal brands or things that they launch frequently. I know a lot of the music artists that I listen to, they're always live and I'm glued to it. I'm just like, so what is your life like? Oh, and you're going there? Okay, that's cool. With a lot of us, you know, it may not be that extensive. I've literally been stuck working at a co-working space at 4220 one night, got super bored, decided to go live to talk about mental health and about like balancing anxiety and deadlines and stuff. And on that night, I feel like that's when, like, I don't know, I felt the power of my community giving me insight after insight. And you can actually still watch that story, that series of stories, in the live video on Instagram. And sometimes it's not just about promoting, if that makes sense. That these strategies really become a part of how we are growing. And sometimes we need that. Sometimes we need these types of strategies, not just to sell our products and our services, but to really gain the support and feel less lonely in the world, especially as entrepreneurs, you know? Because this work, can sometimes feel super, super lonely. So these would be some strategies. I implore you to also think about what might be most authentic for you, that you can find joy in, so that it doesn't feel like a chore or a burden to engage with the people who are supporting what you're doing and supporting who you are as a human. So I would leave you with this, to be intentional, to, as much as you can, stay consistent. Some of us, we're gonna do some work, we're gonna do better. But as much as you can, even as you are developing brands for yourself, don't lose that sense of who you are as a human. Don't sell out. Don't sell your soul to the devil to make some extra bucks or to be Instagram famous. It's not worth it. There are ways that you can use like boosted posts, paid marketing, paid advertising to promote your brand. In my own experience with doing some of that, it's proven to be effective for those immediate moments that if I want someone to see that I'm hosting this thing a week from now, yeah, I want to boost that so that I can get more ticket sales. But for that sense of building deep community and being in for the long game, that organic reach is what you really want to strive for. Those folks who are attracted to the beauty of who you are and what you're doing and what you're offering. So that's one point. The other point is realizing that you don't have to do this by yourself. This isn't a part of the process necessarily, but it can be if you really want to be in it long term, that you can't take it all as a solo endeavor. And I'm willing to help after May because there's some things happening that are super awesome that I gotta focus on. But like I said, I have a company called Civic Creatives, and although a lot of our work is with local organizations and grassroots initiatives, there's a lot of content that we've developed, and there's a lot of insight that I've gained if you want any one-on-one consulting. If you need a set of eyes to audit your stuff, we've got some really great designers who can take a look and give you a lot of opinions. And then if you just need help developing a branding system for whatever you're rolling out, those are also some other elements. And like the management of all of your assets and just cleaning up house. There are also some other resources or teams that might be helpful as well. One that's called Brand ID. They will help you through the entire process. Waller & Company, which is another woman-owned branding service, is just ringing up all the media and press right now. And so they might be a little bit more on the expensive side, but they can really help you get a lot of your work done. And then Brand Yourself Co. is kind of similar to Personal Brand or PBA, Personal Brand Agency. They have a whole team that is solely dedicated to all of the brand development and the rollout across the internet and across all of your sites. PBA, if I'm correct, will also do a little bit of that PR service to help you get into the media, to help you get those opportunities to further promote your brand, like public speaking. So I wanted to go into some Q&A, but we've talked about some of this. So I'm gonna go to this last slide, and then we can just have a conversation, if that works.